My name's Mark Matzke. I manage the DoD business for ServiceNow. I've been with the company about 9 years. Took a short sabbatical, but came back and want to introduce Doug Enfield. Doug, you want to introduce yourself?
My name is Doug Enfield. I work for the Department of the Army within Army Material Command, Installation Management Command, and I am the Public Works Systems Branch Chief. So we maintain all of the technology that the Directorate of Public Works uses at the installation.
Nice. And I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm a former Marine, and I'll just tell you, many years ago. I mean, this is like almost yeah, like 20 years ago. uh, I was going through my initial training, which is 365 days on the dot, is what it was from when I showed up till when I was allowed to actually engage with an enlisted person going through my training. And I was at the basic school down in Quantico, and we were leaving to go on a hike, and it was going to be like a 4 or 5 hour hike. And as we were leaving, I remember there was like this little like creeping thing of mold on the wall, right? And our hallway was probably about 75, 100 yards long. And there was just like I said, just this little creeping thing of mold. Didn't think anything of it. We go out on our hike. We come back from humping, and we open the door to walk in the hallway, and it was like something out of a movie. The entire hallway, no exaggeration, just covered in this mold. It had gone 75 yards in like 5 hours. It was insane. And so the Marine Corps being the Marine Corps, they're like, all right, everyone on this side of the barracks, grab grab a mattress, and they dragged it over to the other side of the barracks that didn't have the mold yet, and we buddied up 6 to a room for about 3 weeks while they then brought in what looked like a hazmat team to kill this thing with bleach or whatever it is that they, delivered. I tell that story because on one of the weekends that I had leave, I go down to what's now Fort Eisenhower down in Georgia, and my buddies who had commissioned in the Army like, "Hey, come on down for the weekend." I was like, "All right, it's cool." So I follow their directions and I get to the Best Western off base. And I was like, man, how do these lieutenants afford to stay in a hotel on the weekends? You know, I guess the Army must be doing better than the Marine Corps because I was like dead broke at the time. So I get there and I'm like, man, how do you guys afford this? Like, oh, no, 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 we live here. And I was like, what do you mean you live here? They're like, well, we had a little mold problem in our barracks. So they moved all the lieutenants out into the Best Western. Marine Corps was like, no, 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 we're doing 6 to a room. We'll figure this out. So I say that because what we're going to talk about today is a web service, a capability that Doug spearheaded with the Army. And I thought it was just such an interesting story about um, a user experience and a good showcase of taking something, taking action against a problem, and applying the same dexterity, the same usefulness that you would have using Uber as on your phone as to solving a problem within the DoD, right? So anytime we're solving something in the government world, it's like a horse designed by committee, right? You get a camel, right? So I thought this was really good. So let's start with Doug. What is ARMA?
So ARMA stands for ArmyMaintenance.com. And you heard that .com correctly. We are on a commercial website, and that is because we service anyone who lives or works or visits an Army maintained installation. So we are out on the commercial side to make ourselves not only available to service members and their families, but all of those people who work and visit our installations. In 2019, there's something that we have coined the Army housing crisis, where we took some very bad press that turned into some congressional sessions where my bosses at the 3 and 4 star level had to answer some questions to Congress about the state of our privatized housing. So our housing that was maintained by our privatized partners, and were people getting the level of service that the Army was paying for? And it turns out we needed better controls in place to track when maintenance was submitted and whether or not that maintenance was completed. And so Congress put out some mandates that said our privatized partners are required to have digital systems in place to interact with their customers. And General Perna, who was the four-star commanding general of AMC at the time, said, well, the Army is actually the one who maintains most of the housing in the government, with Army family housing overseas, and of course, all of our barracks worldwide. And he said, if we're going to require our partners to do it, then we need to have the same requirement for ourselves. And that's where ArmyMaintenance.com was born. And so we needed a way to be able to digitally communicate with our customers, have them be able to take pictures, write descriptions of the problems that they were having in their housing in barracks, and submit it to their local directorate of public works so that they could maintain those things. This was a brand new thing. We were taking this technology and filling a space where nothing existed before it. That was a pretty radical thing to do, because before it was the call and pray method with the Directorate of Public Works at your installation. You call them up, you tell them you have a problem, and then you begin praying that somebody would respond to it. There was no way to track it without continuing to call back to them. And so now we created a website where they could go see the problem that they had submitted, whether or not it had become a work order, whether or not it had been completed, and see it throughout its life cycle. And when it was finished, they would get a notification and ultimately a survey at the end so they could tell the local DPW how they had been doing. And so we started that in early or late 2019 was when the program started. We actually got a contract in place in August of 2020, and we went live in December of 2020, which is a very expedited timeline. A year after that, in the spring of 21, we went fence to fence, not just housing and barracks, but everything that a DPW maintains on an Army maintained installation. So we have every building, every facility, all the utilities, all the roads, everything that a DPW touches. If you go onto an Army installation, you can go to armymaintenance.com, submit it, and ARMA will create a request that goes to the local folks to fix it.
Now, I've seen this movie before, right? A general comes in and is like, "This is what I want. Go do it." So my question is, when you first started, like, what was the first major muscle movement that you had to do to kind of get this thing rolling?
The first thing that we had a maintenance system in place, and we still have that, and that's our system of record of the General Fund Enterprise Business System in the Army, GFIBS, which handles all of our financials, asset management, maintenance, and that. So one of the first things was we wanted to connect to that because we still had that financial requirement to connect to that. So getting that connection, there were web services that GFIBS had available that I had been trying to connect to from my AO for a long time. And finally, once we had what we call the four-star juice, once we had that leadership engagement at the top level that said, you will make this happen, the wheels started rolling. And so once we were able to get that contract in place, we were able to get GFIBs on board with what we were doing. I think that's what really got us moving in the right direction.
And what was, do you think, like the first win that you recognized that like this is working?
Uh, we the minute we went live, we started to see organic user interaction, right? We started to see registrations coming in. We had the Sergeant Major of the Army put out a tweet. That's about the extent of the advertisement we have. So not very many people see that. So most of what we had was trying to reach down to the garrisons and soldiers telling other soldiers, "Hey, I put this in. I registered." And they were able to start putting those cases in, those maintenance requests, and from that they started to see things get fixed. And then when the surveys started coming back in, and they were mostly positive, that was really the first time we were like, okay, we're doing the right thing here.
Awesome. So the Smash hashtagged Armored and hopefully got a following. I don't know about you guys. I should probably follow the Sergeant Major of the Army, but I don't just yet. So how is Arma used today?
So we are still primarily in the environment that I just explained, where we have customer interaction. So if you go out to armymaintenance.com, you create your account, you can take a picture, you can submit. You can submit for any facility anywhere on the installation. It doesn't have to be just yours or the one you registered for. We really encourage people to put those in for any problem that they see on an Army installation. And so that is our primary use, which is ServiceNow customer service management license. That's all of our users have a CSM license. We are trying to grow the program beyond just customer interaction, which interacts with GFibs and creates the actual work orders in GFibs. We have a couple of pilot sites at Fort Campbell and USAG Bavaria where we are actually doing the work orders, full life cycle management of maintenance from the customer to the technician. They get everything on a handheld. We're trying to go paperless. Pictures are taken not only by the customer, but by the technician when they finish a job. And the customer then is interacting with that work order throughout the entire process. And so it's going pretty well at those pilots.
And how is that different from how it was before? Like for the user experience piece, like for the technician, the customer, and leadership, how's that kind of work?
Well, for the user, which we always start with, like I said, we filled the gap with we gave them a document they could track and a website that they could track where their problem was at and what was going on with it. And the biggest thing part about that was not just so they could see the status of their order. Previous to Arma's existence, nobody knew when their problems were fixed unless it was a broken window and you could see the window was broke. But for a lot of things of working on air conditioning or leaks happening behind walls or things like that, people would submit the problem and they never knew whether or not Public Works had worked on it. And so it wasn't until they called back or they saw the fix happening. Now we have a way that we alert them at different steps of the process. A work order has been created. The work has been completed. The technician has a question and you'll get a text or an email and or needs to be let into a certain area. So we have a lot more customer interaction. And that's what most of our customers tell us. Before we had this system, we didn't know where anything was at. Now we can track it through its life cycle. From a technician standpoint, we have some pretty good metrics on this because now we get pictures and we never got pictures before. And that might sound like a simple thing, but it reduced our technicians' time on site. Before Armo, especially at the installations where we're using FSM, they would go out a little more, about 2.1 times were trips to the site to fix the work. And we're seeing it about solid one time at the site to fix the work. And it's like, how do we get all the way down to one? Well, we have several tickets. They take no trips to the site because they're able to see the picture and call the user or contact them and say, this is how you can fix it. I don't need to come out on site to fix this. So there are several requests we get where they don't even take one trip. So we've been able to reduce. So from the technician standpoint, a picture is worth way more than that description of what the user sends in. So those pictures have really helped us out. And from a leadership standpoint, they now know the scope of what is being reported, right? Before, when you sent it over to Public Works, a lot of times they would accept the work or they wouldn't accept the work. That stuff that was not accepted, we never tracked it before. We didn't know how much stuff. We were just saying, oh, Public Works doesn't do that, or we already have that problem, or things like that. We can now we can track the full scope of the requirement.
And you were telling me earlier about the way you were capturing the surveys, right? The old way was like only the squeaky wheels get heard, but now you're able to get kind of a better cross cut of folks.
Yeah. So for every maintenance request that goes in, when it gets closed out, we send a survey to say, how is your local Public Works doing? Is anybody I don't know if we have any Army folks in here. Hopefully you do. I'm sure you've heard of the infamous ICE, right? The or it was an interactive customer experience. ICE comments are always negative, almost always. They're most of the part negative. And so when a garrison commander looked at his Public Works, how are you doing? He just saw these negative comments. And that was all he had to go on was, hey, DPW, why are you letting these things fall through and not fix and people are unhappy? With our surveys, we have about a 6% response rate on our surveys. And I know that sounds like a small number, but across the industry, it's usually about 2%. So we get a good response rate out of our surveys. And of those 6%, the ones we get back, 92% of them are positive, 4 stars or above, right? So we see a huge response in the positive. Yes, we have negative comments. Yes, people are unhappy with some of the work that we do, but the vast majority, they're very happy. This is something that the DPW and the garrison commander has never been able to track before. And we're able to say, hey, we're doing a 92% good job. We need to clean up the 8%. And that's that's a complete change of the mindset from a garrison commander's perspective compared to before.
Nice. This reminds me, I wish I would have been able to send pictures when I was in Iraq. Uh, I was at an outpost that I had to only man for like 4 weeks while they ripped out the old platoon, and my platoon was kind of the stand-in force for that. And I grew up in the suburbs. Never worked on cars. I'm not very technical, right? I really don't know all that stuff. And I'm there. You couldn't go outside during the day because you'd get shot. It was very hotly contested, highly kinetic environment. And so we're in this building. We don't see daylight, and then all of a sudden, like a week into us being there, power goes out. Everything just shuts down, right? And now we go to backup battery. We call back to higher headquarters, and I was like, I don't know what's going on, but all the power just went out. Like, I'm trying to figure out how we're troubleshooting this, whatever. And like 5 minutes later, they get a technician to get on the phone. They're like, "Sir, have you checked the fuel in the generator?" And I was like, we have a generator? And, and so it turns out that is exactly what happened. We just ran out of fuel. So that was like a dumb lieutenant move, but cover that up. Had I just been able to communicate, they would have quietly done that off the net, and it wouldn't have been as embarrassing. So when Arma actually launched, I'm curious, um, how, other than like Sergeant Major saying, okay, you guys should check this out. Uh, what do you think worked best for people? Was it just like word of mouth, or like how did it work versus how do people just know about it today?
So one of the biggest wins that we had is availability. That, like I said, that .com that we have before we had this digital service where you could go to a website and register and submit. Figuring out how to contact your public works on an installation is not easy. For those folks that raise their hand, work on an Army installation, it might not be easy to find a phone number who's the right person to contact. How do I get something fixed? And so, and then a lot of times there are things like facility managers, what we call RNUs in the Army, and how do I go through them? Do I go up through my chain of command? How do I get something fixed, right? And so this really shortened the length of that problem. I have a problem, I want to get it fixed, and we're trying to shorten that length. So whether you're an E1, you're a contractor that works on the installation, you're a civilian, you're the general spouse, you can go to armymaintenance.com and submit a problem that you see, regardless of rank or station or any type of qualification other than registering with our website. Then you can submit it. And so that is really the availability to all people on an Army installation and being able to submit from anywhere in the Army has really what has grown our system.
Nice. And do you have any kind of recent examples of how this is being used today, or something like a vignette that people be like, all right, I get it. Yeah.
Mark, you're setting me up for this one, right?
Say it. Sorry.
We talked about
That's
this.
why I don't host a TV. Okay. It's all right.
My son is an E2 right now, stationed over in Germany in Kaiserslautern, and he just got to his duty station in January. And we were having a talk on the phone, and I'm asking, of course, with my job and what I have, I'm like, how are the barracks? Is everything working? Is everything, that's my first question. And he says, oh yeah, everything's fine. He's in an older barracks. It was built in the 1950s. So it's definitely one of our older barracks buildings. And so it has a communal shower, right, with 4 shower heads in there. And he said only 2 of the 4 shower heads work in there. So sometimes you have to wait to take a shower in the mornings after PT. And I, immediately give him the pitch that I'm giving all of you right now, right? That armymaintenance.com is out there. You got to go register, take some pictures, send it into your DPW. And he does that. He goes Thursday afternoon, he goes in, he takes pictures. The picture he took was 2 shower heads running and the other 2 not running, which, okay. So he,
Great move, right?
and he submits that. And then the next morning, on Friday morning, he tells his platoon sergeant, E7, that, hey, Sergeant, I submitted this. And the platoon sergeant looks at him and goes, you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to, you're an E2 living in the barracks. You just need to suck it up and just and live with that fact. And my son, with a little bit of back talk that I'm very well familiar with, came back at him and said, no, Sergeant, this is for everybody, and we can submit. And Platoon sergeant wasn't buying it until later that morning when DPW showed up with a couple of shower heads and fixed the shower that day. That was not in pull any strings. I didn't call the DPW. That was not me. It just happened organically, and now the entire battalion is registered in our system, and they believe in it. So that's really right. Is that as we see things get fixed quicker, that's obviously going to help our program more than anything.
Absolutely. That's awesome. Yeah, I think back to, when I was in the Marine Corps, like if there's like a broken shower head, it'd be the first sergeant or the gunny being like, you two, grab some wrenches, come with me. And like, more than likely, none of them are qualified to fix the shower head, right? So like some morning, some poor Lance Corporal is in there showering and, the shower head comes off and hits him in the face. So that's awesome. You guys have that efficiency. As we look to the future, uh, where do you think Armo would be like a year from now?
So right now, I mentioned those two pilot sites at Fort Campbell in Bavaria that we're doing the field service management, full life cycle of that. We are seeing some tremendous gains in the efficiency of our public works and how quickly they are able to solve maintenance issues. And so the slide that he's showing up there shows a little bit of where we are coming from those, and I'll explain those in a minute. But our hope is to grow this program beyond these two pilot sites and hopefully make this the maintenance system of record for public works throughout the Army. As you see there on the blue lines, I know it's very small being presented up there. This was 12 months worth of service requests and how long they took to get completed for a month or for month by month for a year before we went live with FSM. So on average at both sites, at most, it was about 31, 33 days to complete an order, whether it was a priority 1 or 2 or 3, regardless of the priority type. That was the average time it took to complete an order. And overall, it was about 28 days across both installations that it took to complete a what we call a demand maintenance order. So if somebody submitted something, you could expect within about 28 days it would be fixed. What we saw after, you see the green lines there where we went live, and we have seen a steady decrease. We saw a little bit of a learning curve at Fort Campbell as they figured out how to use the system. We took their knowledge over to Bavaria, and they've just gone down ever since to where we have seen a steady decrease. And the very last there is less than 5 days. So in less than a week from submitting a maintenance request, a service member, somebody who lives or works on an installation, is seeing that request get fixed from 28 days to less than 5 days, right? I don't need to explain that anymore. That sells itself of why we want to go forward. With that, the early March numbers that I wasn't able to get on this slide so far in March were less than 4 days. So they're continuing to get better. And we're doing that through, we have a lot less administrative time because we don't do any of the paper, right? We're almost completely paperless. The technicians are actually entering it in on mobile devices. And so there's no clerks that have to go through, and that added time to the process. The time spent going to the work site multiple times, we have less of that. So all of those things has added up to us being able uh, to really get this down. And one of the really good news stories, if you're in the maintenance world at Fort Campbell, what we've seen is a huge increase in the amount of preventative maintenance that they are performing. So we've seen preventative maintenance orders in GFIBs go up significantly, 40 to 50%, because they have time to do them. Before they didn't have time to do, but we've created more time in the technician's schedule to be able to do preventative maintenance.
That's awesome. And I know we talked earlier before the session, so you didn't miss anything, on how AI or Gen AI could play a role. Then you told me that, hey, actually, we use artificial intelligence today. Can you give some examples of what you're doing with that?
We have a couple of examples of AI, and with the explanation a little bit of Gen AI, I'll say we have AI, and that's one, to find duplicate requests. So I want duplicate requests. People throughout the Army say, "What you do? Duplicate requests kill our time. They cause us to chase our tails when we're getting the same request over and over again." My hope is that we get all the duplicate requests we can, and we put them into parent-child relationships, and we have one work order that gets done with many different requests. Because traditionally, what we've done in DPW is when a duplicative request comes in, somebody calls in and says, "Hey, I have this problem." Yeah, we already know. Hang up the phone, right? And what did you just tell your customer? I don't care that you called. I didn't need that input. I didn't need you to call that in. Now with Arma, we take all these requests, we associate them with one work order, and now everyone that submitted it feels valued and that their input was important to the completion of this order, which is a big difference with our relationship with our customers. So we're using AI to identify those duplicative requests when things come in with similar descriptions, similar locations, so that our clerks can then bundle them together in this requests. And we're also using AI to identify those negative survey comments because we want to respond to those, right? We don't want to let negative survey comments just sit out there. That's how we got into the whole housing crisis in the first place. We want to respond to those and be able to take care of those things right away. And so AI is identifying those for us.
And I did not ask you this earlier, but I'm curious if you woke up tomorrow morning and all of a sudden you're like, why am I in this big house? Why do I have a driver? Why do I have 4 stars on my lapel here? If you're, general for the day, um, and you could do anything, what is it that you think you would want to do with this capability that like makes sense for the Army? Obviously, right?
Well, I think that the growth of the field service management module we can have one system with a full life cycle, as well as continuing to interact with our other systems of record. I mentioned GFibs for the Army, and I know for several other services, Builder or SMS is something that we are working with Searle, who owns that system, to connect directly to ARMA, have a greater connection to GFibs, and so having a platform in which we have many different systems, one data set. That is always my goal. So to have all these different systems throughout the Army that everybody likes to use and they have knowledge in and they're smart in, I don't want to get rid of them, but I want to have one data set that everybody interacts with through connections.
So single platform integrations, that engagement layer, make it frictionless as possible to kind of get this
So
work done.
that's the goal.
That's awesome. Uh, Lesson learned, right? As you're looking back on everything that you've done, is there something that you wish someone would have been able to tell you, or if you could go back in time, be like, "Hey, Doug, this isn't as big of a deal as you think," or like, "Hey, maybe you should pay attention to this." What would be that advice you give yourself?
When you're creating a system that is customer centric, right, which is the whole theme of what we're doing in here today, listen to what the customer wants, not necessarily what the people who are receiving it want to receive, right? So we have tried to stay focused to the best of our ability on the customers who need maintenance as opposed to the DPWs who are receiving it. They're not going to like anything we give them because it's different than what they have today, and that's just the nature of it. But what we really want to focus on is a better experience for those people who live in the barracks, for those people who are dealing with the pothole in the road, for those people who are affected by the power outage. That is needs to be our focus. We spend a lot of time trying to make the system just so for the public works, when really that customer experience is what drives us, and that's ultimately what leaders want to fund and grow, is something that the customers enjoy. Even though it might be hard for us on the government side, if it's easier for the customer, we're going to continue to do it.
Nice. And was there any one little like tweak that you did and all of a sudden it like relieved pressure somewhere and you like were like, we should have done that earlier?
I don't know if I have uh, a single thing that we turned. One thing that we didn't pursue right at the front was CAC authentication, right? So that we would have a I know it's not multi-factor, but a smart card
Yeah.
authentication like we have in the DoD. We started out with username and password. Once we got CAC authentication, not only for our DPW folks, but customers also can CAC authenticate. That really opened up what we were able to do for those customers getting into the systems, especially leadership. Non-commissioned officers who are in charge of those soldiers in the barracks could now log in, see reports, see things that were going on in their facility.
That's awesome. That makes people's jobs so much easier. Um, One other like lesson learned as far as looking back, if you had to give people advice that are in here and they're like, man, maybe I can do that for the Navy, maybe I can do that somewhere else. What would be like the biggest piece of advice you would give?
Oh, that one's pretty simple because that is engage the leader at the highest level that'll listen. Without a doubt, a lot of times, within my command or within my directorate, everybody liked the idea. Nobody was really willing to push for it. Once at the 3 and 4 star level, they wanted to have a system. It happened. So if you can get that requirement as high up as possible and get senior leaders to listen, that's gonna be the juice that gets the job done.
Funny fact, I was once given the tertiary duty of managing the inter-service rifle championship matches. It's a 3-day match at Quantico that very boring. Okay. It's like golf if you don't like golf. Okay. Except shooting. And no one ever RSVP'd to show up to these events. And I somehow managed to get the Commandant of the Marine Corps to be the opening shot where we set up these like diesel drums with explosives, and when he shoots, it blows up like the entire target, and everybody loves it. Got him to show up, and all of a sudden, with leadership engagement, every general that had sent regrets was like, "Ah, it was a mistake. I'm actually available that day," and it was a packed house. And my boss was like, "Why is everybody here?" I was like, "Commandant's coming, sir." He's like, "Oh, okay, good to go." So that's awesome. We will take questions for just a few minutes if anyone has any. Anyone? Ah, yes.
Have you looked past, or have you looked at going past DPW and maybe other agencies, personnel management, even like vehicle maintenance in the Army is probably huge. Have you looked at engaging those career fields and possibly
So the question was if we've looked at areas outside of the Directorate of Public Works and what we call facility or asset management to include things like vehicles or possibly weapon systems and things like that. I have not. We do have ServiceNow capabilities that are coming online and using the model that we have created with our authority to operate and with our infrastructure and what we have created with CAC authentication, who are using our model to try to stand up similar systems to accomplish those different missions. But within mine, I'm only funded to maintain facilities, so I'm not trying to grow the program beyond what I will get paid to grow the program
Although that used to be crazy. If he shows up one day, it's like, we're tracking this. They'd be like, what?
to.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ray Burton from TACOM. I was just curious in reference to when you were mentioning how you want to combine multiple tickets under one and track it through that and make it kind of a whole business case. How are you dealing with that as far as your metrics go when you have a single ticket with multiple timelines on it?
So the first ticket wins is the simple answer. So when we have different it's going to be one work order. So it'll be multiple requests, and the main thing that we get out of the request is the location and when was it reported, because the clock starts. We have, for priority one, we have to respond within 2 hours, we have to fix it within 24. So all of our different priorities have clocks on them. So the first one wins, and every request that comes in after that gets is in a child relationship to that parent first request.
But you can track that first request and subsequent ones separately as far as timelines go.
The separate ones are considered part of that first one.
Okay.
So we don't necessarily track them separately, but the first one is going to be the hardest one to achieve because that the clock started first on that one. So yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, listen, Doug took time out of his day to show up and chat with us. I hope you guys enjoyed it, got something out of it. Feel free to look him up anytime. He's available 24 hours a day. Hit him up on Twitter. But I just want to do a nice big round of applause and thank you so much.
All right, Mark.